Something strange is happening at motorcycle dealerships. Thousands of brand new bikes, fresh off the line, are sitting in dealership lots with no one willing to buy them. Some haven't moved in over a year, but crazy enough, the industry is still building like demand is booming. But the truth? Showrooms are overflowing, warehouses are packed, and no one's buying. Here's the real story behind why motorcycles are rotting on lots and what it means for the future of riding. At the moment, people just aren't buying motorcycles like they used to, and I mean really not buying them. According to recent figures, motorcycle sales in the US dropped over 10% in early 2025 alone, and that's not a small dip. That's a full-blown nosedive. Harley-Davidson, one of the industry's most iconic names, got hit particularly hard, seeing a massive 26% decline in domestic sales. And before you ask, no, that isn't a mistake. That's a quarter of their US market. Gone. Now, why is this happening? The answer is a complicated cocktail of high prices, economic squeeze, and shifting priorities. Let's start with the obvious. Motorcycles have gotten expensive. Like, could have bought a used car instead expensive. Prices have gone up by 47% since 2019, which means that your average decent bike, which used to go for around 10 grand to 12 grand, now comfortably strolls into the 17 to 20 grand range. And that's before you've even added a helmet, jacket, or paid for the ridiculous dealer fees that somehow cost more than your rent. But price tags alone aren't the full story. Financing is now brutal. Interest rates are high, credit is tighter, and lenders are playing hardball. Back in the good old days, like 5 years ago, you could walk into a dealership with a steady job and walk out with a loan that didn't feel like a trap. Now, you practically need a PhD in economics, a perfect credit score, and possibly a firstborn to get decent terms. Add inflation to the mix and you start to see the big picture. People are paying more for groceries, gas, rent, and motorcycles just don't feel essential anymore. You can't exactly ride one to pick up a family-sized pack of toilet paper or do school runs. For many potential buyers, especially the younger crowd, it's just not the right time to drop $20,000 on something that isn't practical for everyday life. And speaking of the younger crowd, well, they're not exactly flooding dealerships either. Most millennials and Gen Zers are financially cautious. Many of them came of age during the 2008 recession or watched their parents get wiped out. So now when they see high prices and tight financing, they run the other way. And if they do have the money, they're often looking at electric alternatives, smaller commuter bikes, or just skipping motorcycles altogether in favor of e-bikes or public transportation. Meanwhile, the boomers who have long been the backbone of big cruiser sales are aging out of riding. It's tough to swing a leg over a 900-pound touring bike when your knees make a sound like popcorn. It's not poking fun, just being real. This shift is leaving manufacturers like Harley and Indian scrambling, stuck with inventory built for an audience that's slowly hanging up their helmets. So what you end up with is this. Manufacturers still churning out motorcycles at nearly full speed, assuming demand will hold. But demand didn't just ease up. It slammed on the brakes, did a U-turn, and disappeared into the distance. The result? Thousands of brand new motorcycles sitting in showrooms, unsold and gathering dust, while dealers quietly panic behind the glossy banners that say 0% APR and ride into summer. It's like throwing a party, ordering 100 pizzas, and realizing no one's coming. But instead of leftovers, you've got showroom floors lined with bikes that depreciate with every passing month. And the worst part? The longer they sit, the less they're worth, financially and cosmetically. So yeah, sales are plummeting, the economy is tightening, prices are high, and unless the industry changes course fast, we're going to see more bikes rotting on lots while buyers hold their wallets and wait for the storm to pass. And trust me, if you're a buyer, that might not be a bad idea. You'd think with sales dropping like a rock, manufacturers would slow down production, maybe ease up on how many bikes they're sending to dealers. But nope, for some reason the conveyor belts keep moving, the crates keep coming, and now dealers across the country are absolutely drowning in motorcycles they can't get rid of. Now from the outside it looks fine. You walk into a dealership and everything looks sharp. Bikes lined up, shiny chrome gleaming under bright lights, sales staff smiling like it's payday. But behind all that polish, there's a quiet storm building. These showrooms, they're packed not because business is booming, but because business has stalled. And those bikes, they aren't trophies, they're ticking financial time bombs. Here's the part most people don't know. Dealers don't just get motorcycles delivered to their door and call it a day. They finance them. It's called floor planning, and it's kind of like putting every motorcycle on a credit card. The manufacturer gets paid up front, the dealership takes the bike, and now they owe interest on it until someone walks in and buys it. And it's not a generous loan either. Most of these deals have about 60 to 90 days of breathing room. After that, the interest starts building. Then come the storage fees, insurance, depreciation, and a growing pile of stress. So what happens when that bike doesn't sell? That's when things start falling apart. Because now the dealer is losing money just by having it sit there. One bike isn't too bad, but when you've got 20 or 30 you haven't moved in months, that's a disaster, and it's happening everywhere. Brand new bikes, never ridden, are already a liability. And what's worse, dealerships can't just drop the prices to clear them out, because if they do, they tank their own margins and risk upsetting the manufacturer. There's a delicate line between getting rid of stock and triggering corporate drama. So instead, a lot of them just let the bikes sit. They rotate them around the showroom so customers think new inventory is coming in. Sometimes they'll throw a cover on one and pretend it's reserved, or move it to a back corner like it's part of a special promotion. But it's all smoke and mirrors. That brand new adventure bike in the corner with a "just arrived" tag? It might have been sitting there since last summer. And the longer it sits, the worse it gets. Tires develop flat spots, batteries go dead, seals dry out, paint starts to dull. It's like a slow motion breakdown. That bike might have 0 miles, but it's already aging in place. And buyers are starting to notice. No one wants to pay full price for something that's been baking under showroom lights for 14 months, especially when private sellers and auctions are offering newer models with actual road time for less. Now, multiply that by hundreds of dealerships across the country and you've got a full-blown inventory crisis, the kind no one really wants to talk about. Manufacturers are still pushing bikes, dealers are getting buried, and somewhere in the middle is a warehouse full of motorcycles that were supposed to be on the road by now. Instead, they're collecting dust and racking up interest. It's reached the point where some dealers are quietly selling bikes at auctions just to get them off their books, not even to turn a profit, just to stop the bleeding. Others are pushing low-mileage demo units as new or bundling them with accessories just to sweeten the deal, but even then, customers are hesitating. The excitement is gone, and what's left is a glut of overpriced machines that no one really needs right now. And here's the worst part. That floor plan debt doesn't care how the market's doing. It keeps piling up, whether the bikes sell or not. So now you've got dealers who can't bring in new inventory because they're still on the hook for the old stuff. And the manufacturers, they've already been paid. They're not the ones stuck with a $19,000 sport bike that hasn't moved in 2 years. So yeah, the bikes look good, but don't let the shine fool you. Behind every fresh fairing and spotless tank is a dealer quietly sweating over bills, hoping the next guy through the door is ready to buy without asking too many questions. Because if that bike stays put any longer, it's not just gonna sit, it's gonna sink them. If the US motorcycle market is struggling, the global scene is on a full-blown fire, and not the exciting kind with revving engines and burnouts in front of screaming crowds. No, this is more like watching a slow-motion industrial car crash where everyone saw it coming, but no one hit the brakes in time. Let's start with KTM, the brand known for its rowdy orange bikes, Dakar domination, and making dirt riders grin like lunatics. Well, in 2025, they found themselves sitting on an absolutely ridiculous number of unsold motorcycles. Not 5,000, not even 50,000. Try 265,000 brand new motorcycles collecting dust across warehouses and shipping yards around the world. That's not just a bad sales quarter, it's a full-blown system failure. And to make it worse, many of those bikes are 2023 and 2024 models, meaning the value's already starting to slip before they've even hit the throttle. To put that number into perspective, KTM only sold around 268,000 motorcycles globally in all of 2023. So yeah, they're essentially holding onto a full year of inventory with no clear path forward. It's like baking an entire cake and then realizing no one's coming to the party. Except this cake is made of steel, rubber, and broken financial forecasts. And this isn't just KTM getting greedy. This is what happens when global manufacturers bet big on growth that doesn't materialize. During the pandemic, motorcycle sales actually went up for a while. People were stuck at home, daydreaming about hitting the open road. Bikes were backordered, prices shot up. Everyone thought we're entering a new golden age of riding. So what did manufacturers do? They doubled down. More factories, more units, more models. Everyone assumed demand would keep rising, especially with the buzz around electric motorcycles and last-mile mobility. The problem is, that demand didn't stick. As soon as interest rates climbed and wallets started tightening, people backed off. But the bikes? They just kept coming. This overproduction wasn't isolated either. Brands across Europe and Asia went all in on production. Honda, Yamaha, Royal Enfield, and BMW all pushed hard to hit targets based on 2021 optimism. Some of them were gambling on emerging markets. Others were hoping electric bike sales would take off faster than they actually did. The result? Warehouses full of unsold bikes sitting in limbo while dealerships quietly pled for the tap to be turned off. It's especially bad in Europe, where emissions laws are tightening and showrooms are running out of space. Several EU brands have had to reallocate entire shipping containers of bikes to different countries just to avoid storage penalties. In some places, they're not even uncrating the bikes anymore. They just sit there, wrapped in plastic, and hope. Not even dealerships want to touch them because their floors are already overloaded with unsold models from the last 2 years. And let's not forget the impact of supply chain whiplash. Remember when chips were impossible to find and everyone was paying top dollar for anything with wheels? That supply shock led to major backlogs, which then triggered a massive wave of catch-up manufacturing. By the time all those parts finally came through, the demand was gone. So now, factories are sitting on mountains of finished bikes with no buyers, no space, and no clue what to do next. KTM Situation got so bad that they ended up buried in over 3 billion euros in debt, with reports that some of their warehouses were literally at capacity. There were even rumors that certain models like the Duke 390 and Adventure 890 were being quietly funneled to lower tier markets at deep discounts just to clear the backlog. And as word got out, savvy buyers started waiting for clearance deals instead of buying at full price, creating a weird stalemate where everyone knows the discounts are coming, but no one wants to be the sucker who pays early. It's gotten so bad that manufacturers are now looking at radical options. Some are considering halting production entirely for months. Others are trying to repackage older bikes as new old stock, with updated paint or bundled accessories. KTM even pulled some bikes from their 2025 catalog just to create the illusion of scarcity and build anticipation again. But that doesn't change the fact that somewhere, behind a locked gate in Austria or Spain, are tens of thousands of motorcycles sitting idle, waiting for a ride that may never come. Even the used market has started to feel the ripple. Prices on certain secondhand models have dropped because new bikes are being fire sold for nearly the same amount. This throws the entire resale ecosystem into chaos. Private sellers can't compete with a dealer offering 0 miles, factory warranty, and a couple of grand off just to move product. And so more used bikes sit, adding another layer to the saturation. If you're a rider, it's a bizarre time. You can walk into a showroom and be surrounded by brand new motorcycles with desperate price tags, yet somehow feel like the vibe is off. Like the music stopped, but the dance kept going. And if you've ever wondered why some bikes are suddenly popping up with 2 years of free service or bundled with $1,000 in riding gear, now you know. It's not generosity, it's survival mode. The global overproduction problem is proof that optimism without brakes can be dangerous. Manufacturers built too much too fast and for a future that never arrived. And now the consequences are stacking up, literally, in warehouses, ports, and parking lots all over the world. This isn't just a supply issue, it's a warning sign. If the industry doesn't realign production with real-world demand, we're going to keep seeing the same cycle. Bikes that were meant to roar off into the sunset are instead quietly rusting in shipping crates, victims of bad forecasting and an industry that hit the gas when it should have been checking the mirrors. If we're to be honest, motorcycle culture isn't dying, but it's definitely going through a serious identity crisis. The type of people walking into dealerships today aren't the same ones who were buying bikes 10, even 5 years ago. The demand hasn't disappeared, but it is changing. And unfortunately for manufacturers and dealerships, they're still stocking inventory for the old crowd, while the new crowd isn't interested in playing by the same rules. For decades, the motorcycle industry was comfortably propped up by the baby boomer generation. These were the riders who grew up idolizing Steve McQueen, who bought their first Harleys or Goldwings in the 80s and 90s, and who had the disposable income to collect bikes like some people collect sneakers. But now, that generation is aging out. And I don't just mean they're slowing down. Some people are physically no longer able to ride. Hips are stiff, backs are sore, and tossing a leg over a 900-pound touring bike just isn't as easy as it used to be. And while the industry saw this shift coming, it didn't adapt fast enough. They kept building big, heavy, high-displacement cruisers and sport tourers priced like luxury cars, assuming the younger generation would step up and keep the wheels turning. But millennials and Gen Z had other plans. First off, let's look at the numbers. The younger generations aren't buying bikes the way boomers did. Part of it's economic. Many millennials came of age during the 2008 recession and spent most of their adult lives navigating job instability, student loans, and skyrocketing housing costs. Now, with inflation in overdrive and interest rates higher than a caffeinated giraffe, a $20,000 motorcycle just isn't high on their priority list. But it's not just about money, it's about lifestyle. For younger riders, motorcycles aren't always about power and prestige. They're about utility, freedom, and in many cases, fun. That means smaller, lighter bikes, urban commuters, scramblers, dual sports, electric models, something that's easy to ride, easy to park, and doesn't need a second mortgage to insure. And here's the disconnect. A lot of dealerships are still filled with heavyweight cruisers, bloated touring bikes, and oversized adventure machines designed for cross-country trips most buyers aren't planning to take. Meanwhile, the bikes younger people do want are either out of stock, under-marketed, or priced awkwardly close to used cars. And don't even get me started on electric bikes. That segment should be blowing up, right? Clean, quiet, perfect for city riders who don't need triple-digit horsepower. But what did some manufacturers do? They dropped $20,000 plus price tags on their first serious electric offerings. Harley's Livewire is fast and futuristic, but most people don't want to pay Tesla money for something with a single seat and no weather protection. At the same time, the image of riding has shifted. Boomers love the idea of long road trips, cross-country freedom, and club culture, but millennials and Gen Z are more into minimalist rides, weekend getaways, or even riding purely for sustainability. A lot of them don't want loud pipes or chrome everything. They want something quiet, efficient, and maybe even a little nerdy. Think riding to work with a laptop backpack, not tearing down the highway with ape hangers and a GoPro on the helmet. Social media also had a massive influence. Trends shift fast. Today it's cafe racers, tomorrow it's custom trackers. One week everyone's obsessed with retro-styled scramblers. Next, it's sleek electrics with integrated navigation and Bluetooth everything. If a brand can't keep up with the vibe, they get tuned out. That's tough for legacy manufacturers who spent decades building bikes for one type of rider and now have to reinvent themselves every few years just to stay relevant. Some brands are trying to catch up. You've got Kawasaki pushing the Ninja 500 and Z500. Yamaha has leaned into the MT line. Royal Enfield is winning over younger riders with affordable retro-styled bikes like the Hunter 350 and Scram 411. But others, like Harley and Indian, are still trying to sell high-end cruisers to a generation that would rather buy a used Ducati Scrambler and spend the leftover cash on camera gear and rent. And here's the kicker. Even when a young rider does walk into a dealership, it's not always a smooth experience. Many sales teams are still operating with an old-school mindset. They're pushing financing plans, trying to upsell on touring packages, throwing out terms like heritage styling and big twin torque. But that doesn't mean much to someone who just wants a reliable, lightweight machine that won't kill their budget or their back. The reality is that the motorcycle industry hasn't just misjudged the market, it's misread the rider. They assumed the next generation would want the same things, and when that didn't happen, they were left with showrooms full of the wrong bikes for the right people. And this matters more than ever because this shift in demographics isn't a passing phase, it's the future of riding. If manufacturers and dealerships don't start seriously adapting by offering better entry-level models, improving financing for young buyers, and marketing bikes in a way that speaks to modern lifestyles, we're going to keep seeing new motorcycles rotting on lots, waiting for a customer who may never show up. The passion for two wheels isn't gone, but the definition of a motorcyclist is evolving. The industry can either evolve with it or keep building bikes for ghosts. So we've talked about why bikes aren't selling, why they're piling up, and how the industry's demographic crystal ball might be permanently cracked. But what actually happens to all those unsold motorcycles once they sit long enough? Do they just vanish? Do dealers quietly sneak them into a clearance bin behind the oil filters? Not quite. What actually unfolds is a strange, sometimes depressing chain of events where brand new bikes slowly lose their value, their luster, and sometimes even their ability to be called new at all. Let's start with the obvious. Time is not a friend to motorcycles that sit still. Unlike wine or collectible baseball cards, a motorcycle doesn't get better with age, it gets worse. You've got rubber parts starting to dry out, batteries draining to nothing, tires developing flat spots, fork seals hardening, and paint slowly fading under showroom lights that never turn off. That bike you saw listed as new might have already gone through 3 trickle chargers and a new set of tires before a single mile ever got put on it. And when a dealership has a lot of inventory sitting for too long, it becomes a problem they can't hide anymore. At first, they might just juggle the bikes around and move them to different corners of the showroom, rotate them into better lighting, and maybe even put a fresh tag onto this as just arrived, even though that's a generous interpretation of reality. But eventually, there's no more hiding. The same model sits, day after day, while newer versions start arriving, making it look even older. At some point, the financial pressure gets too loud to ignore. These bikes are costing money to not sell. Insurance premiums, storage costs, floor plan interest, all of it starts eating into the dealer's margins. So the dealer starts exploring options. Can they drop the price? Maybe, but if it's a high-end bike with slim margins, discounting too much might actually cost them money. Some manufacturers even discourage heavy markdowns to protect the premium image of the brand, which means dealers are stuck with inventory they literally can't move, even if someone's ready to buy it at a fair price. This is when the quiet desperation sets in. You start seeing deals like free gear with purchase or $2,000 in accessories included. Sounds generous, right? But it's often just a tactic to mask a price cut without actually lowering the sticker. Sometimes the free gear is stuff they couldn't sell anyway. I once saw a dealership throw in a women's-sized small riding jacket with the sale of a 1200cc cruiser. The customer was 6'3". It was a weird moment. In more extreme cases, dealers move aging bikes to backlots, out of sight from regular customers. They might use them as demo units, let staff ride them for a few miles, and then relist them as low-mileage showroom models with a slight markdown. Or they get thrown onto online classifieds with vague descriptions like new condition or never registered. Technically true, emotionally dishonest. And when all else fails, the auctions come calling. Once a bike sits long enough, dealerships often ship them off to wholesale auctions. At that point, it's not about profit, it's about cutting losses. The bike sells for a fraction of its value, often to another dealership or a used bike reseller. From there, it might be cleaned up, relisted, and passed along like a hot potato until someone finally decides it's worth riding. And even that's not always the end of the story. Some bikes sit for so long that parts need replacing before they can even be sold. Batteries are toast, fuel tanks get varnished, belts start cracking. A new bike that sat for 18 months might need a mini restoration before it ever sees pavement. And no customer wants to hear that their showroom fresh motorcycle needed 3 hours of wrench time before it would start. And if you think the cosmetic damage stops at a dusty seat or scuffed mirror, think again. Some bikes arrive with shipping scratches and stay that way because no one wants to deal with the hassle. Others sit near showroom doors or windows, exposed to sunlight or moisture, slowly developing faded paint or surface rust. I've seen bikes where the chain had started to corrode before anyone ever adjusted it. That's not just a maintenance issue, that's a confidence killer. It's not just the bikes themselves that suffer, the brand's image takes a hit too. Walk into a dealership and see a bike that's clearly been there for over a year, and suddenly that premium reputation feels a little fake. It starts to feel like something's wrong with the product, even if there's nothing at all. Perception matters, and nothing kills perceived value faster than dust on a brand new motorcycle. This whole process, from the moment the bike arrives to the day it gets carted off to auction, is the hidden side of the motorcycle industry's supply problem. It's not just about sales being down. It's about what happens when the machines that were built with care and pride don't find homes in time. They don't get ridden, they don't get to shine, they just sit there, slowly slipping through the cracks while the next wave of production barrels in behind them. So next time you walk into a dealership and see a stack of brand new motorcycles that no one seems particularly excited about, just know that there's a quiet war happening in that showroom. A battle between finance, timing, and reality. And the motorcycles, they're the ones taking all the hits. At this point, you're probably thinking the motorcycle industry is in a freefall. Bikes aren't selling, dealers are buried, manufacturers are stuck with warehouses full of unsold machines, and the next generation of riders is either broke, disinterested, or riding around on electric scooters with Bluetooth helmets and oat milk lattes. So the big question is, can it bounce back? Well, yes, but not without a serious reality check and some long overdue changes. Let's start with the manufacturers. If this crisis has taught them anything, it's that building more bikes doesn't automatically mean selling more bikes. The old formula of produce, ship, hope is officially broken. What they need now is smarter forecasting, leaner production lines, and a much better understanding of what riders actually want today, not what they wanted 5 years ago. That means fewer giant chrome cruisers priced like family sedans, and more affordable, lightweight, everyday motorcycles that don't require a second garage and a six-figure income. It also means paying attention to the regions where interest is growing, like Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, and urban areas in the West, where compact, efficient motorcycles are seen as practical tools, not toys for weekend warriors. And let's talk about pricing. If the industry wants younger riders to get involved, they need to stop acting like every bike has to be a high-end fashion statement. Nobody's asking for stripped-down garbage, but a simple, well-built motorcycle for under $6,000 shouldn't feel like a mythical creature. When a starter bike costs more than a decent used car, something's wrong. Financing, too, has to evolve. More flexible loan options, better interest rates for first-time buyers, and fewer hidden fees at the dealership table could go a long way. Right now, buying a motorcycle sometimes feels like applying for a mortgage. You shouldn't need a cosigner and a letter of intent just to ride a CB500. Then there's marketing. The old playbook doesn't work anymore. The grizzled cowboy riding through the desert, the leather-clad biker gang, the endless road trip across Monument Valley. It's tiring. Cool for a certain audience, sure, but most 25-year-olds don't relate to that. The industry needs to tell new stories. Stories about real people, real commutes, real weekend escapes, and even real daily struggles, because motorcycles are still one of the cheapest, most efficient ways to get around. That message just got buried under years of horsepower wars and heritage obsession. And dealerships? They've got some work to do too. The whole showroom experience has to feel less like buying a luxury item and more like joining a community. New riders walk in and get overwhelmed by paperwork, pressure, and a wall of bikes they don't understand yet. What if dealerships leaned into being more like motorcycle hubs, host events, offer short test ride loops, teach new riders how to maintain their bikes, turn the buying process into something exciting, not intimidating? There's also a real opportunity to clean up the used market. Right now, the gap between new and used prices is often so narrow that buyers feel paralyzed. If manufacturers created certified pre-owned programs, kind of like what automakers do, they could recapture some of that lost traffic and put more riders on bikes, even if they're not straight off the factory line. And yes, there's room for electric bikes, but only if they're priced reasonably, offer real-world range, and aren't trying to reinvent the wheel just for the sake of buzz. Most people don't need 150 miles of range or ultra-fast charging. They just want something fun, affordable, and quiet to zip around town without worrying that a replacement battery will cost more than the bike itself. At the end of the day, motorcycles still offer something no car, bus, or e-scooter can match: freedom. That raw, wind-in-your-face feeling of leaving everything behind and just riding. That hasn't gone away. The problem is that the industry built too many bikes for a rider that barely exists anymore, and not enough for the one that's growing right now. But here's the upside: motorcycles are resilient. So are the people who ride them. The industry has reinvented itself before, and it can do it again. If manufacturers can be bold enough to downsize, refocus, and listen, really listen to what today's riders are saying, there's a future here that's still wide open. It won't be easy. There's going to be more pain before there's progress. More markdowns, more quiet closures, more awkward showroom shuffles. But eventually, the inventory will clear. The demand will stabilize. And if the industry gets its act together, the next wave of motorcycles might just be the most exciting we've seen in decades. Not because they're louder or faster, but because they finally reflect the people who ride them. So yeah, bikes are rotting on lots right now, but that doesn't have to be the end of the story. It might just be the reset the motorcycle world didn't know it needed. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. See you in the next one.